Jaden had grown up in a life of wealth, but not of warmth. His mother had passed away when he was too young to remember, leaving him to be raised by his emotionally distant father. He had never experienced a mother's love, and as a result, he saw women as unimportant in a man's life, mere accessories to status, nothing more. Jaden had everything: wealth, looks, intelligence. And he knew it. Born into privilege, he walked through life with the certainty that he was above most people. Women. He tolerated them but never truly valued them. To him, they were accessories, admirers who craved his attention, competitors who tried to prove a point, or background noise that didn't matter. At the university, his cold and arrogant demeanor made him intimidating to many, and he saw no reason to change. He leaned back in his seat at the lecture hall, bored, as the professor droned on. A group of girls in the front row kept stealing glances at him, whispering and giggling. He smirked. "Predictable, Mr. Jaden, your thoughts?" The professor's voice cut through his thoughts. Jaden stretched lazily, acting as though he had been paying attention the whole time. "On what, exactly?" he asked, his tone dripping with arrogance. The class chuckled. The professor sighed. "As brilliant as you think you are, Mr. Jaden, I suggest you start engaging with the discussion. You might be surprised at what you learn." Jaden rolled his eyes. There was nothing he needed to learn that he hadn't already mastered. The class continued, but his mind was elsewhere, until a quiet but firm voice interrupted the discussion. At first, he barely registered it. Just another student speaking. But there was something about the confidence in that voice that made him pause for half a second. Still, he dismissed it. Nothing worth his time. Jaden Richards, the definition of privilege. Born into wealth, he walked through life like the world owed him admiration. His presence commanded attention, and he loved it. At Blackridge University, he was untouchable, the rich, handsome student every girl wished to impress. But to him, most women were nothing more than background noise. As he strolled through campus with his friends, a girl accidentally bumped into him, dropping her books. "Oh. I'm so sorry," she said, quickly kneeling to gather them. Jaden scoffed, barely glancing at her. "Watch where you're going next time," he said coldly, stepping past her like she didn't exist. His friends laughed. "Man, you didn't even help her." One of them joked. Jaden smirked. "Not my problem." To him, women were either useful or irrelevant, nothing in between. Jaden's world was predictable. He thrived on control. Knowing exactly how people reacted to him. His friends, if they could be called that, were mostly guys who admired his wealth or status. And the women? They either flirted with him openly or tried to impress him by playing hard to get. He hated pretense. He hated games. In his mind, he was always ahead. At the campus cafe, Jaden sat at his usual table, sipping an overpriced drink while scrolling through his phone. A girl named Melissa, one of the most admired students in school, approached him with a nervous smile. "Hey, Jaden. Got you a coffee," she said, holding it out. Jaden glanced up lazily. "Did I ask for it?" Melissa's smile faltered. "No, but I just thought." "Then take it back," he interrupted. "I don't take random gifts from people looking for attention." A few students nearby gasped at his cruelty, but Jaden didn't care. Melissa, clearly embarrassed, quickly turned and left. One of his friends chuckled. "Dude, you're ruthless." Jaden shrugged. Better she learns now. I don't do charity cases. One afternoon, Jaden was in the library when a shy girl named Brenda hesitantly approached him. Jaden, could you help me with a project? You're really good at business strategy, and Jaden raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. You're hoping I'll spend hours helping you, and then you'll use it as an excuse to get close to me? Brenda's face turned red. No, look, he said, snapping his book shut. You girls need to stop wasting my time. If you need help, pay someone for it. I'm not your free tutor. Brenda swallowed hard and turned away without another word. Jaden smirked, feeling nothing. To him, emotions were weaknesses. And women? Just distractions. I heard there's a debate competition coming up. One of his friends, Lucas, who watched him from afar as he humiliated Brenda, walked up to him and said, stirring at the book he was reading. You joining? Jaden smirked. What's the point? I'd win anyway. Lucas chuckled. True. But apparently, Professor Daniels is picking the teams, and rumor has it he wants to humble you this time. Jaden's smirk didn't fade. Let him try. But the next few days proved that the professor wasn't joking. When the list of pairings was announced, Jaden barely paid attention, until he heard his own name. He had expected to be paired with someone who respected his status, perhaps even admired him. But when he glanced at his assigned competitors, he was met with an unexpected sight: Ariana and Charles. Charles looked slightly intimidated, but Ariana, nothing. No reaction. No glance in his direction. Not a hint of intimidation or admiration. She simply nodded at the professor's announcement and continued taking notes, as if being paired with him was the most ordinary thing in the world. Jaden's jaw tightened. He was used to people being eager, whether to impress him, challenge him, or at the very least acknowledge him. But Ariana? She did none of that, and for some reason, that unsettled him. On the day of the debate competition, the debate hall buzzed with anticipation as students took their seats. Jaden leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, exuding confidence. Across from him, Ariana sat upright, flipping through her neatly arranged notes. Jaden scoffed. You don't have to pretend to take this so seriously. We both know how this is going to end. Ariana didn't even glance up. Oh. And how's that? He smirked. I win. You put up a decent fight. People clap. End of story. She finally lifted her gaze, meeting his with calm defiance. Wow, such a predictable script. Too bad I didn't sign up for that. His smirk twitched. Cute. But I don't lose. Ariana tapped her pen against the table. There's a first time for everything. Jaden leaned forward. Listen, I've been crushing debates since my first year. I don't need a teammate slowing me down. Teammate? She scoffed. We're opponents. And trust me, you're the one who should keep up. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. He was used to competitors caving under pressure, fumbling their words, or worse, idolizing him. But Ariana wasn't nervous. She wasn't impressed, she was challenging him. The moderator stepped up, signaling the start. Jaden exhaled, shaking off the strange irritation bubbling inside him. Fine. If she wanted to fight, he'd make sure she regretted. Jaden barely heard the chatter of students around him. His mind was still on Ariana, on her audacity. She had spoken to him like he was just another student, not the Jaden Richards. His teammate, Marcus, nudged him. "Yo, what was that about?" Jaden scoffed, still irritated. "That Ariana girl, she's insufferable. She actually thinks she can dictate how we should handle this debate." Marcus chuckled. "Oh, the smallish one. Heard she's got fire. Doesn't back down from anyone." Jaden's jaw tightened. "Yeah. She'll back down from me." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? Because from what I just saw, she didn't seem fazed by you at all." Jaden clenched his fists under the table. That was exactly the problem. No one ignored him. No one dismissed him, and if Ariana thought she could, she was in for a rude awakening. Just then, the debate moderator walked in, signaling the start of the competition. But as Jaden straightened in his chair, his focus had already shifted. This wasn't just about winning the debate anymore. It was about making sure Ariana knew exactly who she was dealing with. The debate hall was filled with energy. Jaden thrived in moments like this, when he had an audience, when people were watching him dominate, as he made his argument. His voice was calm, controlled, authoritative. He could see the audience nodding, impressed. As usual, then Ariana took the mic. She wasn't loud. She didn't try to match his charisma. Instead, she spoke with a quiet confidence that commanded attention, and to Jaden's surprise, people listened. More than that, they were engaged. Her words weren't just intelligent, they were sharp, cutting through his points with precision. For the first time in a long time, Jaden felt something he hadn't felt before, pressure, and he didn't like it. When the debate ended, both of parties had done well. Both Jaden and Ariana had won the crowd's favor. People weren't just impressed with Ariana. They admired her, and Jaden, he felt something new, something unfamiliar, a need to prove himself, that he was the best. After the debate competition, Jaden's reputation as one of the top intellectuals on campus grew. Professors admired his sharp mind, and students, especially girls, wanted to be associated with him. During a business strategy group project, Jaden was paired with 3 other students, including a strong-willed girl named Vanessa. "We should consider ethical consumerism in our analysis," Vanessa suggested confidently. Jaden smirked. "That's cute, but let's focus on real business. Profits matter, not feelings." Vanessa frowned. "It's not about feelings, Jaden. Ethics play a huge role in modern business." "Look," Jaden interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "I know you probably spend hours watching TED Talks, but I don't have time for idealistic nonsense. Stick to the numbers and let the professionals handle the strategy." The group fell silent. Vanessa clenched her fists, but Jaden had already turned his attention to his laptop, ignoring her. As usual, he had no interest in hearing a woman's perspective. One afternoon, while heading to his car, Jaden was stopped by Claire, one of the most admired girls in school. She was known for her elegance and charm. And several guys wished they were in Jaden's position at that moment. "Jaden," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I know you're busy, but I just wanted to give you this." She handed him a neatly folded note. Jaden took it, unfolded it, and read it in front of her. A small smirk formed on his lips. "A love letter? Seriously?" Claire blushed. "I just wanted to. Don't waste your time," he said flatly, crumpling the note and tossing it into the nearest trash can. "I don't do high school romance." Gasps echoed through the corridor. Claire's eyes filled with humiliation as whispers spread around them. Jaden walked away without looking back. To him, feelings were a game he had no interest in playing. A few weeks later, the school announced an educational trip as part of their final year practical exams. Students would be paired up to complete tasks in a mountainous area, testing their problem-solving skills and teamwork. Jaden wasn't worried. He could work with anyone, until he saw his name, paired with Ariana. His head snapped toward her across the room. She was already looking at the list, arms folded, a frown on her face. Then, as if she could sense his glare, she turned toward him. Their eyes met, neither spoke, but their expressions said everything. This was going to be war. The bus ride was long, the road bumpy, but the tension between Jaden and Ariana was worse. They barely spoke. Lucas leaned in from behind. "Man, you're lucky. Ariana is smart. She'll help you ace the task." Jaden scoffed. "I don't need her." Meanwhile, Ariana was having a different conversation with her friend, George. "Be careful, Ariana," George warned. "Jaden is competitive. He might try to sabotage you just to prove he's better." Ariana smirked. "Let him try." Just then, the bus jerked violently. The driver struggled to control the vehicle as they hit an unexpected landslide. Students screamed. The bus tilted dangerously toward the edge of the road. Overlooking a steep drop, Jaden's heart pounded. Ariana instinctively grabbed the seat in front of her, whispering a prayer under her breath. Finally, the driver managed to steady the bus, stopping just inches from the cliff's edge. Silence, then whispers. Jaden turned to Ariana, noticing for the first time that she was completely calm. While others panicked, she had been praying. That was the first time he saw her in a different light. The bus came to a slow halt, and the excited chatter of students filled the air. As soon as the doors swung open, they poured out, stretching their limbs after the long ride. Ariana adjusted the straps of her backpack, inhaling the crisp mountain air. It was refreshing, so different from the crowded university halls. She glanced around, noting how some students were already clicking pictures, eager to document the trip. Jaden, on the other hand, stepped off the bus with an air of disinterest. He had his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Lucas nudged him. "Not your scene, huh?" Jaden exhaled. "I don't see why we couldn't just do this at some fancy resort." Lucas smirked. "Because struggling through a mountain is part of the experience, rich boy." Jaden rolled his eyes just as the instructor clapped his hands to gather everyone's attention. "All right, students. Welcome to your final year educational trip. The tasks ahead of you will challenge not just your intellect but also your teamwork skills. You have all been paired with a partner, and your performance together will determine your final grades for this exercise." Murmurs broke out among the students. Jaden stole a glance at Ariana, who was listening intently. He felt a twinge of irritation. The thought of having to work closely with her was already giving him a headache. The instructor continued, pointing towards the entrance of the trail. "Ahead of you is a 3-day task-filled journey through this mountainous terrain. Your goal is to complete each challenge successfully with your partner. Along the way, you'll encounter checkpoints where you'll receive instructions on the next task." Jaden sighed, muttering under his breath, "This is ridiculous." Ariana, who stood nearby, glanced at him. "You're already giving up. We haven't even started." He turned to her, ready to retort, but before he could, the instructor's whistle blew. "Teams, prepare yourselves. Your journey begins now." Before setting off, the organizers provided refreshments for students to take on the journey. Some were too excited and forgot to grab essentials. Ariana, always well prepared, packed water, snacks, and fruits. She even took extra. Just in case, Jaden, like most of the others, didn't bother. He assumed he'd be fine. Jaden had assumed Ariana wasn't interested in anyone. She didn't flirt, didn't giggle like the other girls, so why was she smiling at George? George had been friends with Ariana since their first year. He was confident, funny, and clearly cared about her. For the first time, Jaden felt something unusual, irritation. Was it because of Ariana? Or because George was getting attention Jaden never cared for? Until now, Lucas leaned in. Looks like someone else is interested in your partner. Jaden didn't respond, but something inside tightened. Their first major task was a test of both intelligence and endurance. Build a bridge using only limited materials and cross it. Jaden rolled up his sleeves. Easy. Ariana studied the materials carefully. No, it's not. He frowned. We just tie the ropes, place the planks, and walk across. Ariana shook her head. If we don't tie the ropes correctly, the bridge will collapse. Jaden ignored her and started building. Within minutes, his bridge snapped under its own weight. Ariana sighed. I told you. Jaden clenched his jaw. Fine. What's your plan? She explained her method. And together, they built a sturdier bridge. When they finally crossed, Jaden exhaled. He hated to admit it, but she was right. Again, that night, as students rested by the campfire, Jaden sat alone. He wasn't used to losing, but more than that. He wasn't used to caring about what someone thought of him, yet, here he was, watching Ariana and George talk, feeling something he didn't recognize. Maybe it was jealousy, or maybe it was something worse. The next day, students were given a new challenge, to find a hidden landmark in the mountainous area using only a map and compass. Jaden was already frustrated. George had volunteered to help Ariana read the map. Jaden scoffed. We don't need him. Ariana raised an eyebrow. You can read a compass. Jaden hesitated. She smirked. That's what I thought. They moved through the thick forest, but as time passed, Jaden noticed something strange. The path felt wrong. We should turn back, he muttered. George, who was leading, shook his head. No, we're close. But just as they rounded a corner, the ground beneath them gave way. A sudden landslide sent rocks tumbling down. Ariana screamed as she lost her footing. Jaden lunged forward, grabbing her wrist just before she fell over the edge, but the weight was too much. Jaden and Ariana both tumbled down into the ravine. Jaden groaned as he sat up. His arm was bruised, and his clothes were covered in dirt. Ariana was beside him, unconscious. His heart pounded. Ariana. She stirred, coughing. What happened? We fell, he muttered. They were trapped in a small cave at the bottom of the ravine. Above them, the cliff was too steep to climb, and night was falling fast. Jaden pulled out his phone. No signal. Ariana exhaled shakily. George and the others will come looking for us. Jaden clenched his fists. I don't need him to save me. Ariana shot him a tired look. Could you put your ego aside for 1 second? There was silence. She shivered. The temperature was dropping. Jaden sighed, removing his jacket. Here. Ariana hesitated before taking it. Thanks. By morning, voices echoed above them, Ariana. Jaden. It was George. Ariana cupped her hands over her mouth. We're here. Within minutes, ropes were lowered, and George helped Ariana up first. When it was Jaden's turn, George smirked. Didn't think I'd have to save you. Jaden glared but said nothing. Back at camp, everyone surrounded Ariana, checking if she was okay. Jaden watched as George placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Something inside Jaden snapped. Later that night, as George was walking away from the campfire, Jaden cornered him. I see what you're doing. George raised an eyebrow. What am I doing? Jaden's jaw tightened. You like her. George smirked. And what if I do? The question is, do you? Jaden had no answer. But the irritation in his chest was enough of a clue. Jaden found himself in an unfamiliar place, his heart. He had always been in control, detached from emotions, but now, he was struggling. He didn't know when it had happened, but somewhere along this trip, Ariana had started invading his thoughts. He hated it. He hated how he found himself watching her, how he noticed the way she smiled when she prayed before every challenge, how she never panicked no matter the task. But what frustrated him even more was George. George was always around her. Jaden clenched his fists whenever he saw them together, laughing, working side by side. He had never felt threatened by another man before, yet here he was, his chest tightening each time George touched Ariana's arm or leaned in too close. Their last major task was the most difficult. A full climb to the highest point of the mountain. Jaden and Ariana were paired again. Halfway up, Jaden noticed Ariana struggling. Give me your hand, he said. She hesitated but took it. Together, they climbed higher until they reached the top. They finally became friends after the final task. Late that evening, after the teams had completed a grueling rock climbing task, Ariana overheard a hushed conversation near the tents. She paused, hidden behind a tree. It was George, and he wasn't alone. Listen, I don't care how long it takes. George's voice was sharp. I've been working on this. For a second, Ariana's blood ran cold. What was he talking about? She's rich, right? The other voice chuckled. That family of hers, her dad's business is big. Once she trusts you enough, you can get what you need. Ariana gasped. Ariana is going to be mine. Whether she realizes it now or later. Her heart pounded in her chest. The George she thought was her friend, someone she had trusted for years, was using her. She stepped back, trying to process everything. But a twig snapped beneath her feet. George's head whipped around. Who's there? Ariana's breath hitched. Then, she ran. She didn't stop until she reached the campfire where the rest of the students were gathered. Her mind raced. Should she tell someone? Would anyone believe her? The camp was over. Students bustled around the bus, loading their bags and saying their last goodbyes before the journey back to school. Some were exhausted, while others were still buzzing from the memories made over the past few days. Jaden stood near the bus, hands in his pockets, watching Ariana from a distance. She was talking to George. His jaw tightened. It wasn't the first time he had caught them together, but something about this interaction was different. Ariana's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, her expression guarded. George, on the other hand, leaned in slightly, his usual charming smirk in place. Lucas strolled up beside Jaden and nudged him. You've been watching her all morning. Just admit it, man. Jaden scoffed. Admit what? Lucas grinned. That you care. Jaden rolled his eyes. I don't. Before he could finish, Ariana abruptly turned and walked toward the bus, leaving George standing there, looking irritated. Jaden's gaze followed her. Something wasn't right, and he intended to find out what. Ariana had shut everyone out. The betrayal by George had left her shaken, and the worst part was, she had ignored all the red flags. She wasn't ready to trust anyone again, not even Jaden. The way she avoided him in class, at the cafeteria, and even during group projects was painfully obvious. Jaden, on the other hand, was losing sleep. He couldn't understand why Ariana was suddenly keeping her distance. Had he done something wrong? He wanted answers. Few days later, as Ariana sat on a quiet bench, lost in thought, Jaden finally approached her. Ariana, he said softly, sitting beside her. Did I do something? Ariana didn't look at him. No, you didn't. Then why are you avoiding me? She hesitated. I need space. Jaden wasn't convinced. His instincts told him there was something deeper. Ariana, you can talk to me. I don't know what's wrong, but I know you're not okay. Her hands clenched into fists. You wouldn't understand. Jaden sighed. Try me. Ariana turned to him, her eyes filled with pain. What if the people you trusted weren't who they seemed? What if everything you believed about someone was a lie? Jaden frowned. Is this about George? Ariana's breath hitched. She hadn't expected him to say his name. She quickly looked away. Jaden's voice was firm. I don't know what he did, but whatever it is, you don't have to go through this alone. But Ariana wasn't ready. She shook her head and stood up. I have to go. As she walked away, Jaden knew one thing. He wasn't giving up. Jaden lay awake in his dorm, restless. Ariana's words echoed in his mind. I don't really know who to trust anymore. That wasn't just hesitation, that was fear. Something, or someone, had made her feel this way, and he was going to find out who. The next day, Jaden was relentless. He found excuses to be around Ariana. If she went to the library, he was already there. If she chose a quiet bench outside to sit, he'd coincidentally walk past. Why are you following me? She finally snapped after catching him loitering by the entrance of her lecture hall. Jaden smirked. What? Can't a guy expand his academic interests? Ariana gave him a look that could melt ice. Jaden held up his hands in surrender. Okay, fine. You don't trust me. I get it. But whatever you're running from, you don't have to run alone. Her face flickered with something vulnerable, but she turned away. Just drop it, Jaden. He wouldn't. 2 days passed. Ariana kept her guard up, but then, something changed. Jaden had just finished basketball practice when he saw her standing by the entrance of his hostel. Her arms were crossed. She was chewing her lip, like she was debating whether to turn and run. Jaden slowed. Ariana. She took a deep breath. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. She opened her mouth, ready to tell him everything, but George was suddenly right behind her. Ariana. He called out, his voice smooth, too smooth. Where did you run off to? Ariana turned slowly. What was she supposed to do now? Ariana forced a smile as George approached, her mind racing. Are you okay? George asked, draping an arm around her shoulder. Jaden clenched his fists. Why did it bother him so much? She knew she had to act normal. But she had heard something, something that made her question everything about George. George had spent years carefully crafting his image, reliable, trustworthy, the perfect friend. He had spent years making sure Ariana trusted him, manipulating her, controlling how people saw him, and now, because of Jaden, that was all falling apart. Ariana had been avoiding him for some time now. He couldn't allow that. As he watched Jaden and Ariana at the hostel entrance, his jaw clenched. His fists tightened. Jaden had to go, his mind raced. Then, an idea hit him, a perfect setup. That night, George sent a message from an anonymous number. "Meet me at the old library storage room at midnight. I have something important for you. Don't tell anyone." Jaden, unaware of the danger lurking, received the message while finishing up his assignment. He frowned. It was unusual. Suspicious, even. But curiosity got the better of him, and so, he went. When Jaden arrived behind the science block, the place was empty, at first. Then, a sharp shove from behind, Jaden stumbled forward, slamming against the wall. He barely had time to turn before George stepped into view, his expression smug. "Didn't think you'd actually come," George said. Jaden straightened, jaw tightening. "What do you want, George?" George took a slow step forward. "You think you won, don't you?" Jaden's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a competition." George's smirk deepened. "Everything is a competition. And you took what was mine." Jaden scoffed. "Ariana isn't a trophy, George." Something in George's face snapped. He grabbed Jaden's collar. But Jaden didn't flinch. "You don't get it," George hissed. "I built her trust. I shaped how she saw me. And you ruined everything." Jaden's muscles tensed, but he kept his voice steady. "No, George. You did that yourself." Before George could respond, voices echoed down the hallway, footsteps, someone was coming. A searing pain exploded on Jaden's head. His vision blurred as he staggered forward, his knees giving out beneath him. The world spun. He barely registered the shadow moving in front of him before the ground rushed up to meet him. His body hit the pavement hard, the cold cement pressing against his cheek. Darkness clawed at the edges of his mind, through the haze. A voice, low, venomous, cut through the silence. "You should have stayed out of my way, Jaden." Footsteps, fading, gone. The library's soft glow barely reached the farthest shelves, casting eerie shadows. Ariana tapped her pen against her notebook, lost in thought. Something wasn't right. Jaden hadn't been seen for hours, and an uneasy feeling gnawed at her. Then, as she absent-mindedly flipped through her journal, her eyes landed on an old note, a note from George. Her pulse quickened as she read the familiar words. "You don't need anyone else, Ariana. Just me. Be careful who you trust. Some people only want to take what's yours." Her fingers curled around the paper. How had she not seen it before? Everything clicked into place. The possessiveness, the subtle manipulations, the way George had always tried to turn her against Jaden. Her phone buzzed. A message from a classmate. "Jaden hasn't been seen since after classes. We're starting to get worried." Ariana's breath caught. Her gut screamed at her. She shoved her books into her bag and ran. The humid night air was thick, the campus eerily silent except for the distant hum of voices. Ariana's heart pounded as she sprinted across the campus. Then, she saw him, Jaden, lying on the ground, motionless. Her legs nearly gave out as she dropped beside him, shaking his shoulder. "Jaden. Jaden, wake up." A weak groan. His eyelids fluttered, his face contorted in pain. relief and fury surged through her veins. Jaden blinked up at her, his voice hoarse. It was George. Ariana's blood ran cold. Unbeknownst to him, a student who had been watching from a distance, had recorded everything, the attack, his words, his retreat. The video was already spreading through the student body. Jaden stirred, his eyes slowly opening to the bright lights of the infirmary. His head ached, a dull throb at the back where George had struck him. Ariana was there, sitting beside him, her expression a mix of relief and fury. "You scared me," she muttered, shaking her head. Jaden managed a weak smile. "Guess I have a habit of doing that." Before she could respond, the door opened. A group of school authorities entered, their expressions grim. Behind them, the student with the recording held up his phone. The video played, George's voice, clear as day. "You should have stayed out of my way, Jaden." The authorities exchanged looks. It was all the proof they needed. Within hours, the school launched a full search for George. By morning, he was found, expelled, reported. His reputation shattered. For the first time, George faced the consequences of his actions, and as Jaden lay in the infirmary, Ariana beside him, the weight of the night settled. Justice had been served, and George was no longer a threat. After everything, Jaden couldn't ignore it anymore. Something had changed in him, not just because of Ariana, but because of what she believed in. He had mocked faith before, dismissed it, thought it was for weak people, but now, he wanted to understand. That evening, he found Ariana sitting on a campus bench, reading. Without a word, he sat beside her. She glanced at him. "What's up?" Jaden hesitated, then nodded at her Bible. "Tell me more about him." Ariana's eyes widened slightly, then softened. She turned the pages. "Where do I start?" Jaden exhaled. "From the beginning." And so, she did. As the sun set over the campus, Jaden took his first step toward something greater than himself. The old Jaden would have been the center of attention, cracking jokes, dismissing people's thoughts, and making sure everyone knew his status. But now, he listened. At the cafeteria, as his friends debated over a topic, Jaden leaned back, arms crossed, absorbing every word. He asked questions. He acknowledged perspectives. "You're surprisingly quiet," one of his friends, Daniel, noted. "Old Jaden would have shut us all down by now." Jaden smirked. "Maybe the old me needed to shut up more often." Daniel chuckled. "Well, I like the new you. Feels real." Jaden didn't respond right away, but Ariana, watching from across the room, saw something new in his expression. Peace. Jaden wasn't blind to the way social status worked on campus. Before, he might have ignored it. He might have even laughed along, but not anymore. One afternoon, as he walked down the hallway, he noticed a small group gathered near the lockers. The laughter wasn't the good kind. It was sharp, cutting, meant to humiliate. A second-year student named Brian stood in the center, gripping his backpack straps tightly, his face red with embarrassment. Jaden recognized the ones doing the teasing, guys he used to associate with. "Problem here?" Jaden's voice cut through the tension like a blade. The group turned, momentarily startled. One of them, Eric, forced a smirk. "Just having some fun." Jaden's gaze hardened. "Doesn't look fun to me." A heavy silence settled over them. Eric scoffed but didn't push back. Not when Jaden was looking at him like that. The group slowly dispersed, leaving Brian standing there, still tense. Jaden patted his shoulder. "You good?" Brian nodded quickly, looking both relieved and surprised. Yeah. Thanks. Jaden simply nodded and walked away. But as he did, he knew, this was the kind of person he should have been all along. Relationships used to be about control for Jaden. About maintaining an image. But now, sitting beside Ariana, he realized how much had changed. You know, he said, glancing at her, I used to think emotions made you weak. Ariana raised a brow. Oh. Jaden exhaled, watching the colors of the sunset. Yeah. I was taught that power and detachment meant strength. That caring too much made you vulnerable. Ariana tilted her head. And now? Jaden turned to her, something raw in his gaze. Now, I think real strength is in the connections we build. In actually caring. In choosing to love even when it's not easy. Ariana's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by the honesty. Jaden chuckled. See? If I had said something like that a year ago, you'd be wondering if I hit my head. Ariana laughed. I mean, you did hit your head. Jaden smirked. Fair. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Ariana spoke softly. I like this version of you. Jaden's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something new. Something good, and for the first time, he truly believed he was becoming the man he was meant to be. He had found Christ, and that filled him with joy. Months later, Jaden and Ariana found themselves walking together across campus. So, Ariana said playfully, I hear you're a changed man now. Jaden smirked. Who knew? Guess I needed someone to show me what really matters. Ariana grinned. And what does really matter, Mr. Jaden? He caught her hand. Held it, God, he said firmly. And you? Ariana blushed. Jaden chuckled. Took me long enough, huh? Ariana smiled. The best things. They're always worth waiting for. And as they walked into their future, hand in hand, it was clear, this was only the beginning of a love story that was destined to last. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories with powerful life lessons. True treasure isn't always as expected. Jaden and Ariana's journey teaches us about growth, humility, and the beauty of giving people a chance. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to realize you were wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more captivating stories.